I have studied a dozen of languages in my life, and now I can confidently say that I speak 4 or 5 of them with a quite decent level of fluency. So I'm often surprised how learning a new language seems impossible to so many people, and how people give up halfway through the process when the hardest parts are actually behind them. Today I want to share with you how I go about studying a language from scratch, and some of the challenges you might be facing when studying a language, and how you might want to go about overcoming them. So first, let's start with the basics. You would obviously start with the alphabet. From my experience, there are some alphabets that are easier to learn, like the Korean Hangul, but some are more difficult, like the Arabic alphabet, in which the shapes of the letters change according to their positions in the word, or like Hebrew or the Cyrillic alphabet, which have basically 2 sets of alphabets, printed and cursive. There's the Chinese writing system, which is actually not an alphabet, but a system composed of an enormous amount of logographs, and you will have to remember hundreds, if not thousands, of logographs before you are able to read a passage. But you can always start with pinyin, an alphabet created for beginners or children to study Chinese characters. It's the same in Japanese. If you run into kanji, you could always start with hiragana or katakana. You would also be exposed to the basic phonemes of the language when studying the alphabet, as well as some basic pronouns like I or you or he or she or this or that. Some languages like Mandarin or Vietnamese or Thai are tonal languages. They have different tones. That might take some getting used to. At the beginning, you will have trouble telling the differences between those tones, but after a while, your brain will get used to it. After that, there's grammar. Besides subject pronouns, like we mentioned, there's also going to be, we normally start with the present tense, and other simple grammatical concepts like gender, like in French or Spanish, there's the masculine gender and the feminine gender, and other basic case particles like in Korean and Japanese, and as well as in Russian, Uyghur that I've studied, there are cases. Some are more complicated, some are easier. And after that, you will be able to say an enormous amount of things, like he is a professor, she is a doctor, él es profesor, ella es médica, 他是教授, 他是医生, 그는 교수다, 그녀는 의사다. Or things like they make dinner, ellos preparan la cena, 他们准备晚饭, 그들은 저녁을 만든다. 彼らは夕食作ります. And adding on to that, you will start studying more complicated grammar. Like other tenses, for example, past tense or the future tense. And also to express location or direction or time. And in some languages, there are more complicated case structures. In English, it's really simple. This is just like I and me. But in languages like German or Russian, the case system is way more complicated. So this part might be a little challenging. Some grammatical structures might be counterintuitive, a little bit hard to understand and hard to memorize. But remember, practice makes perfect. Do the grammar exercises in the textbooks. Memorize some phrases and sentences with these grammatical structures. If you do enough of these, the grammar will be internalized and it will become natural. So at this point, you will be able to express way more sophisticated ideas, like he was walking to school and got hit by a car. Iba caminando a la escuela y fue atropellado por un coche. 他正在走路去上学，突然被车撞了。그는 학교 가고 있었는데 차에 차였습니다. 彼は学校へ歩いて車にはねられました. And despite of how many things you're able to understand and express at this stage, this is where most people actually quit. The efforts you're spending are not paying off as much as during the stages before. Like, you've spent so much time and energy in this, but conversations between native speakers is still indecipherable. And whenever you try to read something, there are always an enormous amount of things you don't recognize. And every time you try to have a conversation with someone in that language, you still have trouble making full grammatical sentences. This is because you're uncertain about grammatical details. So when you hear a sentence, your brain can't automatically dissect the sentence into grammatical components. So sometimes all you hear is blurred sounds. For example, let's assume you're studying English. You've studied the grammatical structure of the second conditional, but you don't know it very well. So if I say something like, if I were to go to your place, when you hear it, you fail to recognize the verb were is this second conditional conjugation of the verb to be. So you fail to recognize that verb, and as a result of that, the I before it, the to after it, the whole thing blurs into a meaningless sound. So all you hear is go to your place. The same thing happens when you don't know certain words, especially verbs in a sentence. But remember, if you get to this stage, the hardest parts of studying a language are already behind you. And now you have most of the tools you need to use and enjoy the language. All you need to do is to practice and familiarize yourself with the grammar and to accumulate your vocabulary. In other words, you need to be patient and keep studying. Find some videos or audio clips in a friendly speed. Read some children's books or even books for teenagers. You can also work on your speaking through shadowing dialogues or speeches or simply talking to yourself. Just make sure you have laid a solid grammatical foundation before you rush into the speaking part, because if you don't, some of the mistakes, both grammatical and pronunciational, might fossilize and will be very hard to correct later on. Okay. This stage of accumulation and slow improvement may take a while. You'll still have some trouble understanding native speakers, especially when they're talking to each other. You might still find it difficult to read content written for native speakers as well. But gradually, if you keep doing this, at some point, you'll suddenly realize that you could understand way more things than you could before. And you're making longer and more complex sentences. And from there on, it's really just about going out there and having fun with the language. Watch whatever movies or TV shows you might like that you can get your hands on. Read some books that interest you in the language. And I think this is the stage where you actually get to enjoy the language. It is actually during this stage of accumulation that you actually get to know the culture and the people behind the language. And that is the beauty of language learning. There are some languages that are quite special that some of the rules that I've mentioned don't apply to them. They have quite bizarre grammatical structures comparatively. But I think language learning for most people follows the same logic. And it's, like I said, it's all about having fun and going out there enjoying the language learning process. Okay, that's pretty much all I have to say. And don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the little bell button. Ciao.